In southern Los Angeles, there is a town home to a haunted asylum. The town is Downey, and the asylum is also known as the Hollydale Hospital. The hospital was opened in 1888 and was known for treating the elderly, the poor, handicapped, and the insane. But in 1918, when the Spanish flu struck the area, all the victims were sent to the hospital as well. Also, during World War II, part of the hospital was turned into Camp Morrow, which is used as a hospital for the wounded soldiers. After the war, the hospital became a hotspot for victims of polio. By the 1950s, the hospital became a ghost town. Lord knows how many people died in this huge hospital. But there's one that happened recently. About 1.5 to 2 years ago, the remains of a little girl was found inside the asylum. I couldn't tell you how long she had been there, but I can tell you she wasn't found in one piece. Ever since then, the police have been patrolling the area way more than they used to. Now that I've given you some brief history of this place, I'm going to tell you about what happened when I tried to go inside. My friend Cruz and I were here on 2 different occasions. Obviously, I'm going to start with the first one. So day 1 was probably about 2200 by the time we got there. When we pulled up, I didn't believe that I was staring at the asylum. It's massive. Here's a very rough sketch of the place that isn't drawn to scale. There's a fence with barbed wire around the whole perimeter of the place. And not only that, but some of the buildings have a second barbed wire fence around it. So not only did we have to worry about trying to get around one fence, we'd have to worry about another. Imagine trying to run from the cops in a situation like that. Speaking of the cops, let's talk about the patrol cars. There was one parked inside on one of the main roads of the asylum. One is parked in a lot next to the chapel, and we believe another driving through the streets accessible to the public. The only reason I say we believe is because we noticed him at the end of the first night. The cop in the parking lot had moved, so we didn't know if it was the one parked in the parking lot or if he moved and this guy finally showed up. I will admit, the first day we didn't actually go inside the asylum. We tried though. There's a couple businesses behind the place, and we were over there trying to clip the fence. Now I'd like to take this time to say that what we're doing is totally illegal, we knew the consequences, and do not advise anybody who tries to enter the asylum. If we did get caught, for sure, what we'd be charged with was damage to government property and trespassing. There are signs literally everywhere that say no trespassing, so we couldn't even use that as an excuse. Oh, and we didn't know this was off limits? Really? What does that sign say? And that one over there. Anyway, we tried to clip the fence, but it wouldn't give. So we started walking around the rest of the perimeter and discovered that not only are there patrol cars, but the police station is right across the street from a certain portion of the asylum. Honestly, some of the most hopeful places to slip under the fence was right in front of the station. But the station has cameras, and I didn't know if they were pointed in our direction. Okay, so here's the first scary thing that happened to us. Like I said, we were walking around the perimeter, right? At some point, we crossed the street and we're walking past the chapel, which only has one barbed wire fence and is next to some business called Home. We walk past the front of the chapel and hear a noise, so we stop. It sounded like something falling, and I thought it was a cat, but we heard it a couple of times after that. Then a bright light shined from the boards where the windows used to be, and I heard a woman scream. My friend didn't hear it, but that just feeds into my theory that he's deaf. Anyway, we continue walking, eventually attract the attention of the cops, and left. And that's the end of the first night at the haunted asylum. Now for night number 2. Came back 2 days after the first night. We came an hour earlier than the other night, so it was 2100, just around. There was only one cop that day, and he was driving around the perimeter. Also, there was what I call the neighborhood watch. It's just two old men who walk around yelling at kids who try to sneak into the place. I knew who they were because of a video I saw. I'm pretty sure they call it quits at 10, because we never saw them again after that. And the cop that was roving the area was covering ground fairly quickly, so the game plan for the day was to first go to the chapel, then try to get into the actual asylum. My thought process was, if we knew people were in the chapel, then there was a way in. The other night, I thought it was some kids being stupid, maybe even doing a satanic ritual. I thought for sure there was a way in, so Cruz and I were standing on the side of the chapel. No cop cars in sight, except for a pair of headlights coming from around the corner. Oh shit. We bolted to the back of the chapel, which is next to the residential houses. We hid behind a tree back there and studied the road. I'm sure the cop went into this driveway and then came back out. After 5 minutes of waiting, Cruz went to try to clip the fence again. He tried for maybe 5 more minutes. Nothing. Good thing we had an extra pair of wire cutters in the car. We just had to go get them. We snuck around to the front of the church, and that's when scary incident number 2 happened. At the same place, we heard something falling, footsteps, and I saw a shadow crossing the porch. I knew it wasn't our shadow because they didn't reach that far, and it couldn't be a person because it was a shadow. You see right through it. I told Cruz what I saw, and he said that he saw it too. Not only that, but he said that he saw another one while he was trying to clip the fence. I don't remember if I mentioned this. While he was cutting the fence, I was keeping a lookout. I remember hearing footsteps coming from in front of us and behind us. I didn't know where I was supposed to be looking. I also felt like somebody was watching me. The stairway felt menacing. I looked over at a broken window and thought that I saw a pair of black translucent hands grabbing the top of the window. Yeah. Why would I want to try to go back into this place knowing that something was obviously up? I don't know. The whole thing was my idea, so it's not like I can blame Cruz. He's the one blaming me. Anyway, back to the story. We went to the car, got the other clippers, and headed back to the chapel. Before we got close, we saw a group of 4 teenagers walking towards us. To shorten this story a little bit, we all decided to join forces and try to get into the chapel. We went back to the same tree Cruz and I were hiding behind earlier. But 2 of the kids pointed out a hole underneath the fence just a couple feet behind us. How on God's green earth did we miss that? Cruz clipped the fence a little to make it a little easier for us to crawl under, and voila. We were on the other side. The first thing we noticed there was leaves everywhere. They crunched with every step. We all huddled in a roofed doorway, and once we were all settled, we heard loud footsteps coming from the back of the chapel. It sounded like it was coming from the inside of the fence. And when I say loud, I mean loud. The only thing growing through our minds was, this is it. That's the cops. We're done for it. But nothing happened. I even peeked over the side of the wall and didn't see a thing. We gave it another few minutes before we tried to pick the lock. We tried for a while. The dog must have heard us and started barking obnoxiously. He barked for a good minute. Then the owner came out and called him in. 2 of the guys that we were with went to try to find another door that'd be easier to pick. The 4 of us that remained were silent. We could faintly hear the 2 guys talking, and apart from that, we heard more people talking. It didn't sound like our guys at all. Eventually, the other 2 guys left to be lookouts for the cops, so they left the chapel altogether. So that left Cruz and I to pick the same lock. We could hear footsteps and more talking from people that we didn't recognize. After 20 minutes trying to pick the lock, the 2 guys that were trying to find another way in come running around the corner, loudly whispering the cops were there. One of the guys called the 2 that were out for a lookout. He said that the cops were parked right in front of the chapel. someone give us away? Did the owner of that dog report the dog's mad barking as a suspicion? I don't know, but this isn't good. The police never left their car. We told the guy on the other end of the phone to cause a distraction and hung up. We waited for about 5 minutes. And let me just say, that was the longest 5 minutes of my life. Again, footsteps coming from around the corner and us thinking that the jig was up. But we got the call from the guys distracting the cops. They said the coast was clear, so we ran out of there. We all met up at a light post, and another cop pulled up and told us that loitering wasn't allowed. After that, we all parted ways. My drive to explore the Downey Asylum is still strong. Actually stronger than ever, since I didn't actually make it inside any of the buildings. Making it on the other side of the fence was a huge advantage for me. But if there's anything I want you guys to get from this, is that this place is scary, extremely dangerous, and I do not advise anybody to follow my footsteps. I do plan on returning to the asylum one day, and I want to keep exploring places like this.